right, so for this video, we're going to set up some obstacles, some boxes to be able to move around, or things to roll around. So I'm going to go to my content drawer, go to my blueprints folder, right click blueprint class actor, and I'll call this BP_movable box. I'll open this up. Now for this, we could do this a couple different ways. We can set up a collider and then have a mesh inside of there, which you would need to do if you want to have any object that isn't a perfect cube or sphere or capsule, which might work. But for our purposes, let's go ahead and just add in a static mesh. I'll make this the root, and I'll set the static mesh to be a cube. I'm going to decrease the scale of this to be about 0.75. Now I have a cube. And let's go ahead and go to our content drawer, materials. I'm going to make a new material. And I'll call this M_movable object, in case we want to have a different kind of movable thing. Instead of just a cube, maybe we want a sphere or log or whatever. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to set this to a color. I'm going to pick purple. Click OK, apply, save, and I'll set our movable object to that color for that material. Then with our static mesh selected, I'm going to go to physics and then simulate physics. And for the mass, I'm going to set this to be a mass of 25. I'm going to make it pretty light. Compile and save. Then I'm going to go into my blueprints folder, and I'm going to grab a movable box and drag that into my scene. Now, once you do this, the boxes are going to end up snapping weirdly. Like, you may not be able to control exactly if it's on the ground perfectly or not. And you're going to have a lot of these, and it'd be really annoying to have to go through and reposition them all and make sure they're all perfectly flat on the ground. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to use the end key on your keyboard. As you're dragging your object around, if you press the end key, it will just snap it down to the ground. It'll just snap it to the surface. And so you can get a bunch of these, and you can do that, and it will automatically just snap it to the ground. Also, if you go up here to the top, you should see this surface snapping. This makes it so when you drag an actor around in the world, it won't just hover in the air. It will snap to the surface that it's on, so you can position these a lot easier. I'll select 2, and I will Control-C, Control-V. And now I have 4. So if I go and press play, I now have movable boxes, and I can't move them that easily. They're pretty heavy. And when they bump into each other, it can be a little wonky. However, if I go into my movable box and I set my weight, my mass to like 1 kilogram, I should be able to move them a lot easier. And if we wanted to, we could set it up so our physics material on these boxes are a little bit easier to work with. I'll go to my content drawer, physics materials, right click, physics, physical material, and I'll set the physical material there. I'll call this PM_movable object. I'll open this up. I'm going to set the friction to be 0.1 or 0.01. I want it really, really low friction. I want them to slide around really easily. Close that. I'll go to my BP movable box. I'll go to my physics material. and I will set that to PM movable object. Compile and save. And now all of these boxes that I have should have that physical material on it. Press play, and now they should kind of slide around a lot easier. Now, what if we want a different kind of movable object? What if we don't want just a cube? What if we wanted other small little balls that roll around? Well, if I go to my content drawer, blueprints, I could make a brand new blueprint. However, and we'll learn more about this later, we can also just make a child blueprint. So we have BP movable box. I can right click this. I can create a child blueprint class. And I'll call this BP movable spheres. Now, BP movable spheres is a copy of BP movable box. However, it is a child copy. Any changes I make to BP movable box will also show up in BP movable spheres. For instance, if I go to my BP movable box, instead of a box, I change the actual static mesh to a cone. Compile and save. Now my child object is a cone. However, any changes that we make to our child don't affect the parent. So I'm going to set the parent movable box back to a cube. Compile and save that. Then I will open up my BP movable sphere. I'll select my static mesh, and I will change the mesh here to be a sphere. Then compile and save. Everything that we had set up for our BP movable box will transfer to BP movable spheres, making it pretty easy to make more of. I'll go to my content drawer, and I'm going to drag in a bunch of these. Then press play. So I have these spheres, and I should be able to roll into this, and it should roll away and continue to roll. If I knock into these, there we go. What if we want immovable objects? What if we want it so we have objects that we can't move? Like we want an obstacle, like a wall that we have to go in between or something like that. Well, we can add those in pretty easily as well. For this one though, I'm going to create a new blueprint class. There'll be an actor, and I'll call it BP immovable object. So an immovable object that can't be moved. Now I'm calling it object because I'm going to make child versions of this. So I want it to be fairly generic. Go to BP immovable objects. I'm going to add in a static mesh. Make this the root. I'm going to have physics off. I don't want it to be connected to physics here. I'll set the static mesh to a cube as well. Then my content drawer, materials, we'll make a new material for M immovable object. And I'm going to make this red. I will set the material there. Then compile and save. Drag this in. And I can have immovable objects now. So if I hit this, wherever it is, there it is, then it shouldn't move. Cool. I'm going to go back to my BP movable object, and I'm going to go to my static mesh thing right there, and I'm going to actually undo it. I don't want it there. Instead, I'm going to make a child class of BP immovable objects. So I'm going to right click, create child blueprint class, and I'll call this BP immovable box. And in here, I'll set the static mesh to be a cube. And then give this the material here. Compile and save. My immovable object, in case I wanted to, I can change any settings in here and it would affect the immovable box. For the most part though, what we did there is we made it so our physics setting will transfer. I go to my blueprints and then I'm going to drag in an immovable box. I'm going to right click and I'll go to my immovable object. I'm going to right click this and I will create child blueprint class. And I'll call this immovable tower. Open this one up. And I will set the static mesh to be a cylinder or pillar. I'll set the material to be the immovable object color. Compile and save. And now I can put a immovable tower in. Use this like for structural things if I wanted another level or something like that. I'm going to actually open up my immovable object and I'm going to change what I said. I'm going to set this to be a cube after all. That way I have something to draw from. I'll set the material back to that. That way everything that we see inherits from it. All right, so I now have some basic objects. I want you to go ahead and create another movable object. Keep it to the simple shapes, but just make another child movable box for whatever shape you want to work with and add a couple of those into your scene. Perhaps cones or something like that. Just know that the towers don't actually like the physics setup that we have right now, so those might not work.